My name is Amelia Grayson, and I have a story to tell. A story about betrayal, about the slow poison of family secrets, and about the exquisite, slow burn pleasure of revenge. It all began, as these stories often do, with a child's innocent question. Mommy, why is Daddy leaving? 6-year-old Owen stood in the doorway of our Connecticut living room, his eyes wide and confused. Sunlight streamed through the French windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A stark contrast to the heavy silence that had settled over the house. William's suitcase stood by the front door, packed and ready. A physical manifestation of the chasm that had opened up between us. He's just going on a short trip, I stammered, my voice catching in my throat. A trip. That's what we'd agreed on. A trip to Catherine's. My sister's. Owen tilted his head, his brow furrowed. But he packed all his blue shirts. He only packs those for long trips. He knew his father's habits better than I did, or maybe I had just stopped paying attention. Had I been so blind? So caught up in maintaining the facade of the perfect life that my parents had orchestrated for me that I hadn't seen the cracks spreading like spiderwebs across my marriage? Daddy has a lot of meetings, I said, forcing a smile. My mother, Victoria, materialized beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder, her grip surprisingly tight. Owen, darling, she said, her voice smooth as silk. Daddy has important business to attend to. He'll be back soon. But why can't Mommy go? The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken truths. Victoria's grip on my shoulder tightened, a silent warning. Mommy has to stay here and look after you, I said quickly, turning Owen towards the playroom. Why don't you go and finish building that magnificent Lego castle? He trudged off, his small shoulders slumped, the image of his retreating back a mirror of my own defeated posture. As soon as he was out of earshot, Victoria turned to me, her face a mask of disapproval. You mustn't let him see you like this, Amelia. It's unbecoming. Unbecoming, I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. He's 6 years old, Mother. His father is leaving him. William is simply attending to business matters, she corrected, her voice clipped. And it's your responsibility to ensure that this unpleasantness doesn't disrupt Owen's routine. Routine. I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Our entire life is a routine, Mother, a carefully choreographed performance for your benefit. And now the lead actor has walked off stage. My father, Henry, entered the room, his face creased with worry, but not for me. Victoria, have you spoken to Catherine? We need to ensure this doesn't leak. Leak. The word echoed the hollowness I felt inside. They weren't worried about their daughter's broken marriage, about their grandson's confusion. They were worried about appearances, about maintaining the flawless image of the Grayson family, an image that was about to shatter into a million pieces. She's on her way here, Victoria said, her voice tight. We need to present a united front for the family. I looked at them, my parents, the architects of my gilded cage. My perfect sister, Catherine, the woman my husband was leaving me for, and Owen, my son, caught in the crossfire of their carefully constructed lies. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The grief, the confusion, the hurt, coalesced into a hard, cold ball of resolve. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them control my life, or Owen's any longer. The game, I realized, was about to change, and I was ready to play. The days that followed William's departure were a blur of strained smiles and hushed phone calls. My parents orchestrated a carefully crafted narrative. William was working on a crucial project overseas, a project so demanding it required his undivided attention. A project that, coincidentally, aligned perfectly with Catherine's business trip to London. I played along, a puppet dancing to their tune. I soothed Owen's anxieties, fielding his endless questions about his father's return with practiced lies. I attended social functions, plastering a smile on my face and fielding sympathetic glances from acquaintances who knew, or suspected, the truth. The whispers followed me like shadows, each one a tiny pinprick of humiliation. But behind the facade, a quiet rage was building. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my marriage. I was mourning the loss of the life I thought I had. The life my parents had built for me. A life that, I now realized, was built on a foundation of lies and carefully constructed illusions. The confirmation, when it came, wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but a series of small, almost imperceptible clues. A misplaced earring found tucked in the pocket of William's blazer, a hastily deleted text message glimpsed on his iPad, a shared glance between Catherine and my mother, a glance that spoke volumes. It was a slow, agonizing unraveling, each piece of the puzzle falling into place to reveal the ugly truth. I confronted my mother, not with accusations, but with a quiet, steady gaze. "He's with Catherine, isn't he?" She didn't deny it. Instead, she sighed, a dramatic exhalation of breath, and said, "Amelia, you have to understand. These things happen. Marriages fail." "Fail," I repeated, my voice rising. "He left me for my sister." "Catherine is vibrant," my mother offered, as if that explained everything. "She understands William's ambitions. You've always been more domesticated." The word stung, a slap in the face disguised as concern. Domesticated. A gilded cage by any other name. My father, ever the peacemaker, chimed in. "Amelia, your mother is right. This is unfortunate, but we need to move forward. We need to think about what's best for the family." "What's best for the family?" I laughed, the sound hollow and devoid of humor. "What about what's best for me?" "For Owen? You'll be taken care of, Amelia," my father said, his tone dismissive. "Financially, you have nothing to worry about." Taken care of. Another euphemism for control. They would keep me financially dependent, a prisoner in their gilded cage, while William and Catherine paraded their happiness in front of the world. The thought was unbearable. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the length of my bedroom, the anger simmering inside me, a pot about to boil over. I looked at pictures of Owen, his innocent smile a stark contrast to the turmoil I felt. He deserved better than this. I deserved better than this. The first seeds of revenge were sown that night. Small, almost insignificant acts of defiance. I stopped answering my mother's calls, feigning a busy schedule. I enrolled Owen in a soccer league across town, far from the watchful eyes of my parents and their carefully curated social circle. I started wearing brighter colors, a subtle rebellion against the muted tones my mother had always insisted I wear. I even started subtly manipulating situations, planting seeds of doubt in William and Catherine's minds. A casual mention of William's long working hours to Catherine, a seemingly innocent comment about Catherine's frequent trips to London to William. Nothing overt, just enough to create a sliver of unease, a crack in the foundation of their perfect little affair. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A small flicker of control in a life that had felt increasingly out of my hands. The game had begun, and I was determined to play it my way. The Graysons were known for their impeccable image. I would slowly, meticulously, dismantle it piece by piece. They had taken everything from me. Now it was my turn to take something back. The weight of my parents' disapproval, the constant whispers, the suffocating feeling of being trapped, it was all becoming too much. I needed an escape, a confidant, someone outside the gilded cage of my family. I needed Isabel. Isabel had been my best friend since college, a constant through the ever-shifting tides of my life. She was the antithesis of everything my family represented, outspoken, independent, and unapologetically herself. She and her husband, Daniel, a sharp lawyer with a dry wit, lived in a cozy brownstone in Brooklyn, a world away from the manicured lawns and sprawling estates of Connecticut. They blamed me. I blurted out the moment Isabel opened the door, the words tumbling out in a rush. They said I wasn't vibrant enough for William, that Catherine understood his ambitions. Isabel pulled me into a hug, the warmth of her embrace a welcome contrast to the icy chill that had settled over my life. "Those people are insane," she said, her voice firm. "You are one of the most intelligent, capable women I know. They're just threatened by anyone who doesn't fit into their little step-forward wives' fantasy." Daniel, overhearing the conversation, emerged from the kitchen, a glass of wine in hand. "So, the Grayson family drama has finally reached Act Two," he said, a wry smile playing on his lips. "What's the current state of play?" Over a bottle of wine and a plate of takeout, I spilled everything. The affair, my parents' reaction, my simmering resentment, the small acts of rebellion I'd already started. "You want revenge," Daniel said, stating it as a fact, not a question. I nodded, meeting his gaze. "They took everything from me. My husband, my home, my sense of self. I want them to feel the pain I feel." Daniel took a sip of his wine, his expression thoughtful. Going down the legal route would be messy, protracted, and ultimately unsatisfying. You'd spend a fortune and likely end up with nothing but a hefty legal bill and more emotional baggage. "So, what do you suggest?" I asked, my voice tinged with desperation. "Play the long game," he advised. "Subtlety is your greatest weapon. Expose their hypocrisy, dismantle their carefully constructed image, brick by brick. Let them self-destruct." Isabel nodded in agreement. "They're so obsessed with appearances. A few well-placed cracks in their facade will do more damage than any courtroom showdown." Their words resonated with me. A messy legal battle wasn't what I wanted. I wanted something more elegant, more calculated. I wanted them to understand the consequences of their actions, to feel the slow burn of their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. As I left their apartment that night, a sense of purpose had replaced the despair I'd been carrying. I had a plan, a strategy. I wouldn't be a victim. I would be a player. The next day, I made a call I'd been putting off for years. A call to my brother James. He was the black sheep of the family, the one who had escaped their suffocating grasp years ago. He had built a successful business on his own terms, far from the stifling expectations of our parents. "James, it's Amelia," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Amelia?"
He sounded surprised, wary.
"Is everything all right?" "No," I admitted. "Everything is far from all right. I need your help." He listened patiently as I recounted the events of the past few weeks. There was a long silence after I finished speaking, a silence filled with unspoken understanding. "Come out to California," he finally said, his voice warm and reassuring. "Stay with me for a while. Clear your head. We'll figure this out together." James's offer was a lifeline,
An escape.
an alliance. He had always been the outsider, the one who saw through our parents' manipulations. He would be a valuable ally in the game I was about to play. I booked a flight the next day, leaving a brief note for my parents, informing them I was taking Owen on an extended vacation. I didn't ask for their permission. I didn't offer an explanation. I was done asking for their approval. I was taking control of my life, and Owen's finally. The game was on, and I was ready to play to win. California was a revelation. The sunshine, the open space, the sheer distance from my parents' suffocating influence. It was like breathing for the first time in years. James's house, perched on a hill overlooking the Pacific, was a sanctuary, a world away from the gilded cage of my Connecticut life. He didn't pry, didn't offer unsolicited advice. He simply listened, offering a steady presence, a quiet strength that I hadn't realized how much I craved. Owen thrived in the California sun, spending his days exploring the beach, building sandcastles, and making new friends. He seemed lighter, freer, unburdened by the unspoken tensions that had permeated our lives back east. "You're different," James observed one evening, as we watched the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink. "You seem lighter." I smiled, a genuine smile, not the strained, practiced smile I'd worn for so long. "I am different," I admitted. "I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." James nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Good," he said softly. "That's what they took from you, you know. They never wanted you to be yourself. They wanted you to be a reflection of their own ambitions, their own carefully constructed image." His words struck a chord. I had spent my entire life trying to live up to their expectations, contorting myself into the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother. I had lost myself in the process. "I'm taking it back," I said, my voice firm. "I'm taking back my life." James squeezed my shoulder. "That's my girl," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. Over the next few weeks, with James's support, I began to reclaim my life, piece by piece. I started working remotely for a small design firm, rediscovering the passion for interior design that I had buried beneath years of societal expectations. I enrolled Owen in a progressive school that encouraged creativity and independence. And I started subtly chipping away at Catherine's carefully constructed persona. Social media became my weapon of choice. I'd post seemingly innocuous pictures of Owen and me enjoying our new life, pictures that subtly highlighted Catherine's absence. I'd leave comments on her meticulously curated Instagram posts, comments that hinted at the cracks in her perfect facade. "William's working late again?" I'd write, or, "London must be exhausting. You look tired." Nothing overt, just enough to sow a seed of doubt, to create a subtle undercurrent of tension. Back in Connecticut, the whispers intensified. My parents' carefully crafted narrative about William's extended business trip was starting to unravel. The cracks in Catherine's perfect image were becoming more visible. Their carefully constructed world was starting to crumble, just as I had planned. William's calls became more frequent, his voice laced with a mixture of guilt and frustration. He complained about Catherine's constant social engagements, about her demanding nature, about the pressure of maintaining their public image. I listened patiently, offering non-committal responses, feeding his insecurities with carefully chosen words. "It sounds like you're both under a lot of stress," I'd say, or, "It must be difficult to maintain such a demanding lifestyle." I wasn't interested in reconciliation. I was interested in watching him squirm. One afternoon, James walked into my home office, a strange expression on his face. "I just got off the phone with Dad," he said, his voice low. "He's not well." My heart sank. Despite everything, I still loved my father. The news of his illness hit me harder than I expected. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. James hesitated. "He wants to see you," he said finally. "He wants to see you and Owen." I looked at a picture of Owen, his bright smile radiating from the frame. I knew I had to go back. Not for my parents, not for Catherine, but for Owen. He deserved to know his grandfather, flaws and all. And maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for some kind of closure, some kind of understanding. I booked our flights back to Connecticut, a knot of apprehension twisting in my stomach. I was returning to the lion's den, but this time, I wasn't a caged animal. I was a predator, returning to survey the damage I had wrought. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just getting started. Returning to Connecticut felt like stepping back in time. The familiar scent of my mother's lilies, the oppressive silence of the Grayson Manor, the weight of unspoken expectations, it all came rushing back, threatening to suffocate me. But this time I was armed. I had a newfound sense of self, a quiet strength that I hadn't possessed before. My father was weaker than I remembered, his face pale and drawn, his eyes clouded with a mixture of pain and regret. He held Owen close, whispering stories of his childhood, stories I had never heard before. There was a fragility to him, a vulnerability that I hadn't seen before. It chipped away at the resentment I had harbored for so long. My mother, however, was unchanged. She greeted me with a strained embrace, her eyes flitting around the room, assessing the damage. "You look tan," she observed, her tone laced with disapproval. "And Owen's hair is unruly." I simply smiled, a serene smile that infuriated her more than any outburst ever could. "We've been enjoying the California sunshine," I said, my voice calm and steady. "It suits us." Catherine was conspicuously absent. My mother claimed she was busy with work, a thinly veiled excuse that fooled no one. I didn't press the issue. I knew where she was. With William, trying to salvage the crumbling remains of their ill-gotten relationship. Over the next few days, I spent my time with my father listening to his stories, holding his hand, trying to bridge the gap that had always existed between us. He seemed genuinely remorseful, not just for his failing health, but for the way he had treated me, for the life he had allowed my mother to orchestrate for me. One evening, as the sun set, Casting long shadows across his hospital room, he beckoned me closer. "There's something I need to tell you, Amelia," he whispered, his voice weak. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." He confessed a shocking family secret, a secret that had been buried for years. A trust fund, established by my grandfather, meant solely for James. A trust fund that my mother had systematically depleted, funneling the money towards Catherine's education, her lavish wedding, her business ventures. A trust fund that rightfully belonged to my brother, the black sheep, the one they had cast aside. She stole from him? I asked, my voice barely audible. My father nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "She convinced me it was for the good of the family," he whispered. That he wouldn't appreciate it. That Catherine deserved it. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal, the years of deceit, the blatant favoritism that had poisoned our family dynamic. It was the missing piece of the puzzle, the final confirmation of everything I had suspected. My father's confession was more than just a family secret. It was a weapon that could dismantle the carefully constructed world my parents had built, a world built on lies and injustice. It was the catalyst I had been waiting for. I held my father's hand as he drifted off to sleep, his breathing shallow and labored. The anger I had felt towards him was replaced by a strange mixture of pity and resolve. He was a victim too, a victim of my mother's manipulation, a victim of his own weakness. I left the hospital that night with a newfound sense of purpose. The game had changed again. It was no longer about revenge. It was about justice. It was about exposing the truth, no matter how painful. I called James, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and grief. "He told me everything," I said, "about the trust fund, about what Mom did." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, a silence filled with unspoken pain. "I knew," James finally said, his voice flat. "I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined. It's time," I said, my voice firm. "It's time to expose them. It's time to set things right." James agreed. We would return to Connecticut together, not as the prodigal son and the disgraced daughter, but as a united front. We would reclaim what was rightfully ours, not just the money, but the truth. The game was entering its final act, and I was ready to deliver the checkmate. The fallout was swift and brutal. The carefully curated image of the Grayson family, the image my parents had spent a lifetime building, shattered into a million pieces. The whispers turned into shouts, the veiled accusations into public condemnations. My mother, stripped of her social standing, retreated into a shell of denial and bitterness. She refused to speak to me, to James, to anyone who dared to question her version of the truth. She became a pariah, ostracized by the very social circle she had so desperately sought to impress. The irony was almost poetic. She had built her life on appearances, and now, appearances had destroyed her. Catherine, exposed and humiliated, lashed out at everyone around her. Her carefully constructed persona of the perfect wife, the successful businesswoman, crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. William, caught in the crossfire, finally saw the true nature of the woman he had left me for. Their relationship, built on a foundation of lies and deceit, imploded in a spectacularly public fashion. The divorce was messy, protracted, and ultimately pointless. There was nothing left to salvage. The love, or what they had mistaken for love, had evaporated, leaving behind only bitterness and resentment. James, armed with the truth and the unwavering support of Daniel, reclaimed his rightful inheritance. It wasn't about the money, though the financial security was welcome. It was about justice, about reclaiming what had been stolen from him. He used a portion of the money to establish a foundation in our grandfather's name, a foundation dedicated to supporting young entrepreneurs. A quiet act of defiance against the values my parents had espoused. He also insisted on providing for Owen and me, ensuring our financial independence from our parents. I initially resisted, clinging to the remnants of my pride, but he wouldn't hear of it. "This isn't charity, Amelia," he said gently. "This is family. We take care of each other." His words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within me. Family. Not the toxic, dysfunctional family I had grown up with, but a new kind of family built on honesty, respect, and unconditional love. The community, once so quick to admire the Graysons' seemingly perfect life, now reveled in their downfall. The gossip columns were filled with salacious details, each article a fresh wound, a constant reminder of the public humiliation they had endured. I felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting moment of empathy for the pain they were experiencing. But the guilt was quickly replaced by a sense of liberation. The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long, the weight of their expectations, their judgments, their control was finally gone. I could breathe again. I could be myself again. The grand house in Connecticut, once a symbol of my gilded cage, was sold. The proceeds were divided between James and me, a final severance from the life I had once known. I found a small cottage near the coast, a cozy haven filled with light and laughter. It wasn't grand, it wasn't opulent, but it was ours. A place where Owen and I could build our own traditions, our own memories, free from the shadows of the past. The revenge, I realized, wasn't about destroying my family. It was about liberating myself. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about rewriting the story of my life. It was about creating a new kind of family, a family built on love, not lies. A family where Owen could grow up knowing the truth, knowing that his mother wasn't a victim, but a survivor. The game was over. I had won, but the victory wasn't about the spoils. It was about the freedom to finally be me. The silence in the aftermath was deafening. The constant hum of social obligations, the hushed whispers, the ever-present weight of my parents' expectations, it was all gone, replaced by an unsettling quiet. The house felt too big, too empty. Even Owen's laughter seemed to echo in the cavernous rooms. The community, once so eager to bask in the reflected glory of the Grayson name, now shunned us. Invitations dried up. Phone calls went unanswered. The few people who did reach out did so with a mixture of morbid curiosity and thinly veiled pity. I found myself avoiding social gatherings, preferring the quiet solitude of my garden to the whispers and stares of the social circuit. My mother retreated into a self-imposed exile, refusing to acknowledge the wreckage she had wrought. She spent her days locked in her room, surrounded by the remnants of her former life. Photo albums filled with smiling faces, trophies commemorating social victories, designer clothes hanging unworn in her closet. She became a ghost, haunting the halls of the Grayson Manor, a living testament to the destructive power of unchecked ambition and carefully constructed illusions. Catherine, stripped bare of her pretense, was a shadow of her former self. The divorce from William had been acrimonious, leaving her financially depleted and emotionally shattered. The community, once so quick to praise her beauty and grace, now saw her for what she was, a manipulative, social climbing opportunist. The whispers followed her everywhere, a constant reminder of her fall from grace. I saw her once, by chance, at the local grocery store. Her eyes, once bright and full of confidence, were dull and lifeless. She avoided my gaze, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of the pain she had inflicted. William, adrift and alone, tried to salvage his career, but the scandal had tarnished his reputation. He became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of ambition unchecked by morality. He called me a few times, his voice laced with regret, but I refused to engage. There was nothing left to say. The bridge between us had been burned, reduced to ashes by his betrayal. James, ever the pragmatist, focused on rebuilding his life and mine. He oversaw the sale of the Grayson Manor, ensuring that both he and I received our fair share of the proceeds. He encouraged me to pursue my passion for interior design, offering financial support and unwavering encouragement. He became the brother I had always longed for, the confidant I had always needed. Owen, resilient and adaptable, seemed to weather the storm better than any of us. He made new friends, excelled in school, and found solace in the simple pleasures of childhood. He asked about his father occasionally, but the questions were less frequent, less insistent. He seemed to sense, on some level, the complexities of the situation, the unspoken truths that lay beneath the surface. I bought a small cottage near the ocean, a world away from the oppressive grandeur of the Grayson Manor. It was a modest home, but it was filled with light and laughter. It was a sanctuary, a place where Owen and I could heal, where we could build a new life, free from the shadows of the past. The evenings were quiet, filled with the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore, the gentle rustling of leaves in the trees, the comforting sound of Owen's breathing as he slept soundly in his bed. I would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, and think about the journey I had taken, the battles I had fought, the victories I had won. The revenge, I realized, hadn't been about destroying my family. It had been about saving myself. It had been about reclaiming my voice, my identity, my life. It had been about breaking free from the gilded cage and discovering the true meaning of family, of love, of forgiveness. The scars of the past would always be there, a reminder of the battles I had fought, but they no longer defined me. I was free. Life in the small coastal cottage settled into a comfortable rhythm. The days were filled with the simple joys of motherhood, the quiet satisfaction of building a business, the comforting presence of the ocean. The constant tension that had permeated my life for so long had finally dissipated, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. Owen blossomed in our new life. He made friends easily, his laughter echoing through the house, filling the rooms with a warmth that chased away the lingering shadows of the past. He rarely mentioned his father, and when he did, it was with a detached curiosity, not the heart-wrenching longing of a child missing a parent. He was healing, growing, adapting to our new reality with a resilience that both amazed and humbled me. My design business thrived. Freed from the constraints of my parents' expectations, I embraced my own unique style, creating spaces that were both beautiful and functional. Spaces that reflected the personalities of my clients, not the dictates of current trends. Word of mouth spread quickly, and soon I had more clients than I could handle. It wasn't about the money, though the financial independence was welcome. It was about the creative fulfillment, the satisfaction of building something on my own terms. James became a regular fixture in our lives, visiting whenever he could, bringing with him a sense of normalcy, of family. He and Owen formed a close bond, a bond forged in shared experience, in mutual respect. He was the brother I had always wished for, the protector, the confidant, the unwavering source of support. He never judged, never pressured, simply accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Owen and I were building a sandcastle on the beach, I saw a familiar figure walking towards us. It was my mother. She looked older, frilier, the sharp edges of her personality softened by time and circumstance. She didn't apologize, didn't offer excuses. She simply stood there, watching Owen play, a wistful expression on her face. "He looks happy," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "He is," I replied, my voice steady. We stood in silence for a long moment, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore filling the void between us. There was nothing left to say. The years of resentment, the accusations, the recriminations had all faded away, leaving behind a quiet understanding. Can I sit?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I nodded, gesturing to a spot on the sand beside me. We sat in silence, watching Owen build his sandcastle, his small hands working diligently, his brow furrowed in concentration. In that moment, the past and the present converged, the complexities of our family history distilled into this simple, shared experience. She didn't stay long. She simply watched Owen for a while, then stood up, brushed the sand off her dress, and walked away. There were no tearful reconciliations, no dramatic pronouncements of forgiveness. Just a quiet acceptance, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken truths that lay between us. Catherine never reached out. I heard, through mutual acquaintances, that she had left Connecticut, seeking a fresh start in a new city, far from the scene of her downfall. I didn't judge her. Everyone deserves a second chance, a chance to rewrite their own story. William remained a distant figure, a ghost from a past life. I received occasional updates about his career, his new relationships, but they held no emotional weight. He was a stranger, a man I had once loved, but no longer knew. As the years passed, the sharp edges of the past softened, the memories fading into a sepia-toned haze. The anger, the hurt, the resentment gradually dissipated, replaced by a quiet acceptance, a hard-won peace. One evening, as Owen, now a teenager, and I were watching the sunset, he turned to me, his eyes filled with a wisdom beyond his years. "Do you ever miss them?" he asked, his voice hesitant. I thought for a moment, considering the question. "I miss who I thought they were," I finally said, my voice soft. "But I don't miss who they actually were." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Me neither," he said quietly. We sat in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in a breathtaking display of color. The past was gone, but the lessons remained, etched into our hearts, shaping who we had become. We had built our own family, our own traditions, our own definition of happiness. We had reclaimed our story, and that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all.